Welcome to the PDP Situation Report. I'm Mike Baker, your eyes and ears on the world stage. All right, let's get briefed. First up, Ukraine's drone war is hitting Russia where it hurts most, its wallet. Strikes on refineries have crippled Moscow's fuel production, sparking a budget crisis. Correspondent for the Kyiv Post, Jason J. Smart, joins us with his insight. Later in the show, China's military is stepping up its operations around Taiwan, and officials on the island are warning that it could be a prelude to something bigger. Former CIA analyst Buck Sexton just got back from Taiwan. What was he doing in Taiwan? He'll join us to break down what he saw on the ground. But first, today's PDB Spotlight. Russia's war machine is now showing signs of breaking under economic pressure. Ukraine's deep strike campaign, especially its recent attacks on Russian oil refineries, has reportedly sidelined up to 40% of Russia's refining capacity, triggering growing fuel shortages, plunging revenues, and gaps in Moscow's war budget. In response, Putin's regime appears to be conducting internal purges, seizing oligarch assets and watching its elite flee Moscow on private jets. That's how I always flee a place, on my private jet. Signs that loyalty could be fraying under economic strain. For more on that, we turn to Jason J. Smart. He's a Kyiv-based national security strategist and correspondent for the Kyiv Post. You can find his work on YouTube at Jason J. Smart. Jason, welcome back to the show.
It's great to see you, Mike.
Yeah, thanks, man. All right, let's start with a fairly broad question, and you can run this anywhere you want to. How much damage has Ukraine done to refining capacity for Russia?
Pretty substantial. At this point, it's about 58 different facilities have been struck. It's about 40% of the oil refining capacity of Russia that's been destroyed. Overall, Russia today is having shortages of gasoline and diesel throughout the entire country, most especially in the western parts, and especially in the occupied territories such as Crimea. So today, Russia is in pretty bad shape. It is a country that is only known for exporting oil, but today it is not a country that even has sufficient gasoline for its own population.
40% is significant, right? What is that doing more broadly to the Russian economy at the present time?
Well, the Russian economy is in pretty dire stakes. I mean, today the Russian economy is in a situation where it faces high inflation. It faces a central bank that's under control of the Kremlin, so it's not operating independently. So it's not making fiscally wise decisions for the future debt ownership of the state. But also, we look at the banking sector. The banking sector is really low on liquidity. Common citizens are unable to take out the cash they have in banks. And these are all indicative of the fact that there is some serious problems. About 48%, 50% of Russians that are currently employed are looking for a second job because their job does not cover their basic cost. So when you have about half the population looking for a second job, that's usually pretty bad.
At what point, this is pure speculation, but what point does all that equate to the citizens saying enough's enough, let's get Putin out of here?
Well, they did have protests 2 days ago in St. Petersburg, which is very unusual. There was, it's probably better to call them a group of young people, a very large group, hundreds of people, singing anti-war songs and anti-government songs, and also playing the song from Swan Lake. As you recall, the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991 during the coup. Swan Lake was played on national television across all of the Soviet Union. And the fact that that's coming back up as being a cultural reference is probably not a good sign for the Kremlin.
Okay. And now, have you heard anything about Putin's attitude, treatment, actions against the oligarchs?
So there have been some recent arrests of the oligarchs. There's also been the seizure of their assets. It's usually perceived to be more about the FSB, which is the security service of Russia, trying to consolidate the amount of assets that there are in the country. There's not a lot of money going around these days, so they got to get money where they can. So they're trying to squeeze the liquidity out of those oligarchs who are still left to remain standing.
Well, am I wrong in saying, look, an important part of Putin's power base has been the oligarchs, his ability to keep them on side in part by letting them do well?
Sure, absolutely. So the oligarchs, I would always argue that Vladimir Putin ultimately was somebody who was sort of like a cornerstone that kept the oligarchical base happy. He was the one who kept it all together. And today, though, as time passes, he has become more of a keystone. It all depends on him. And today, that keystone is becoming rubbed away. And those oligarchs are getting closer and closer to clashing. We see that the FSB is taking sides, especially against oligarchs who are closer to the military. There's been 17 Russian generals arrested in the past 3 years. 15 of those generals are those who come from the background of logistics or from acquisitions. Why those are important are those are the ones that deal with finance. Now, in any given military, that's probably what, I don't know, 25, 30% of the military is someone that works in logistics. But in the fact of Russia, the fact that 15 out of 17 of those arrested are those that are coming from the background is also a sign that the FSB is trying to milk as much money out of them as they can.
Okay. Yeah. And to what degree have you heard about over the past, let's say, just again, 3.5 years, 3 years, uh, concerns over corruption within the military, contracts, et cetera?
Well, corruption is, I mean, a significant problem in Russia, but that's the whole joke about it, though, is that everybody in the FSB understands that you do not make general in the Russian military unless you're engaged in corruption. And you're not going to be promoted because, I mean, truthfully, your senior officer is not going to sign off on being promoted unless you help him cover up the corruption. The reason you got the promotion is because you're helping him in the business. Why does he need you if you're not going to help in the business? Or you're going to report on him, you're going to squeal on him? Why would he possibly want to recommend you? And so when you're choosing who goes up the ranks below you, it's also people who helped you engage in corruption. So they all understand that everybody's engaged in corruption. The only question at this point is, why are they going after the people that they are? If they have information about everybody, why are they selectively choosing who's prosecuted? But most importantly is probably the general who just got arrested who was in charge of promotions. Why that general is so important is that he would be the one that has all the compromising material about everybody else and what they did or paid in order to get promoted, to get the assignments that they wanted in the military. He would have his little black ledger of exactly who it was that was engaged in corruption with him. So the fact that they went for him is something that sort of shows that the FSB now has quite a significant amount of compromising material about other military officers.
Uh, to what degree have they been successful at, this is going to sound strange, but at hiding the war from the urban centers? I'm thinking in particular St. Peter, Moscow, et cetera. But and by that I mean, to what degree have the problems, the fuel shortages and other issues, been pushed out to the outer regions in an effort to keep the main population centers happy?
Well, it's reached the main centers as well. I mean, the fuel outages are not just limited to the regions, it's also reached the major cities. That being said, I mean, gasoline prices have increased about 50% in the past 3 or 4 months. There's some significant problems. Now, within Russia itself, historically, the weakest base for Vladimir Putin was Moscow, followed by St. Petersburg. That is his weakest support area. So the fact that we're seeing big problems in the
Why is that,
regions,
Jason? I can ask, why is that?
urban elites, liberal, higher education level, more well-traveled, more international. They have a greater grasp of what's going on outside the country. People that live in the regions tend to be poor. Keep in mind, the average Russian makes about $900 a month. Pensions are a few hundred. Those people are not, they don't have, smartphones. They're not scrolling the internet. They're watching state television, so the people out in the regions just receive propaganda and believe it. But they're also the ones that are the least important ones in the society. They lack agency totally. Whereas the ones in the capital, one, have capital, but secondly, they have social capital and the ability to create change or affect change. And so the fact that they understand what's going on and they're not happy with it is not very good for the regime.
So where does that go? Again, I know that's speculation, but I thrive on speculative questions. Where does that go if you follow it in its logical conclusion?
Ultimately, I don't think there'll be a red revolution in Russia where the people rise up against the regime. However, if we look at the history of when coups occur in countries just universally, Russia included, is that if you're about to overthrow a government violently, the one of the things that you look for is to see, is there going to be a counter-revolution? Because the most dangerous part of any sort of coup is that somebody says, well, who chose you to be the new boss? We didn't vote for you. And so
Right.
to make sure that, to prevent that from happening, you have to see the population's generally aligned with what you're trying to do. Now, remember when Prigozhin rolled up towards Moscow with the leader of the Wagner Group 2 years ago, we saw that the people came to his car and they brought him food, they brought him wine. The military leaders in Russia, in Rostov, came to meet with him. The generals sat there and drank coffee with him in the street and smoked cigarettes. They were not running away. They were a little bit nervous that he might actually take power. So the fact that the Russian people didn't resist him, the fact that the Russian military leadership didn't resist him, the fact that the leadership of Russia, whether it's Dmitry Medvedev, the former president, Kirill, the head of the Orthodox Church, they all disappeared. Nobody stuck up for Putin, which is probably a good sign that if push comes to shove, people are willing to take a step over Putin and keep going onwards.
What would cause that shove? I mean, again, you're talking about fuel shortages. You're talking about a variety of problems within the economy, kind of a war weariness, massive casualties over the past 3.5 years. But if none of that has had any impact, and Putin still got his grip on power, what would be that shove that's required?
I think that ultimately it's going to be less ideological, more just rational. I mean, I think game theory would indicate that we can all understand that Vladimir Putin turned 73 this past week. He is eventually going to expire. It's a matter of when. But you realize that the other oligarchs, there is this friction. They're not getting along anymore. And you realize when some other oligarchical faction takes power in Russia, they're definitely going to have to kill you and your family and take all your assets. So if you recognize that day is eventually going to come, it's sort of unwise just to wait for him to die naturally. The smarter thing is to just seize power because you realize you're getting ahead of an eventuality. To just allow the chance or to allow the circumstance to control the situation is probably the least strategically wise thing you can do. The wisest thing you can do is always control the situation that you're in.
Yeah, yeah, I take your point. Jason, listen, being mindful of your time, if you could stay right there, we're going to have to take a quick break. Then we're going to be back with Jason J. Smart. He's in Kyiv, by the way. So if you'll stick around, we'll be right back with more from the Situation Report. Hey, Mike Baker here. Now, I'm sure you've heard that the Fed has finally dropped interest rates, right? And that's great news for American homeowners. Look, expenses have been a major burden on families, obviously. Wages are flat, prices keep climbing, and for many, the only way to make ends meet has been to lean on credit cards. But that cycle of high interest debt makes it hard to stay ahead. So if you're a homeowner, I want you to call my friends over at American Financing. Right now, interest rates have dropped. Many homeowners are seeing options in the low fives. Compare that to credit cards charging rates in the 20s or higher. There's an easy path to see how you can finally put your hard earned equity to work for you. American Financing can help you pay off that expensive debt, free up your cash flow, and keep your budget under control. Their salary based mortgage consultants are saving customers an average of $800 a month. And if you get started today, you may even be able to delay your next mortgage payment. Take control. Call American Financing today. The number 866-885-1881. Again, that number 866-885-1881. Or just visit americanfinancing.net/PDB. Welcome back to the PDB Situation Report. Joining me once again is Jason J. Smart. You can find his work on YouTube at Jason J. Smart. He comes to us from Kyiv. Jason, thanks very much for sticking around.
Great seeing you.
Let's talk about something that made the headlines in a big way over the past week, and that would be the potential for the U.S. to provide Tomahawk missiles to Kyiv. What do you make of that?
Well, that looked like it was pretty set to go up until I saw just in the past hour that Donald Trump now is seemingly reneging on that and believes that perhaps the U.S. doesn't have enough Tomahawk missiles for everybody, and so perhaps will not be doing that any longer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he's now making noises about meeting in Budapest in the coming weeks with Putin to talk about possible peace. Yeah, do you think that's likely to go anywhere, or is this just Putin being Putin and stringing it along?
Well, it's Putin being Putin, and the fact is that the Russians have no respect for him. Even if you hear the way that they speak about him, it's with such a low regard. It's so obvious that they have this sort of mocking attitude towards him, which is once again surprising to me is that we do have the entire U.S. government, or what is it, 16 intelligence agencies and State Department who are all informing him. They read the Russian news. It's not a secret that the Russians despise him. They think he's an idiot. And why he would continue to think that is something where they keep tapping them along, I have no idea. I really have no justification. I mean, the Russians are quite explicit about what they believe. This is not a secret. I'm not a liberal. I just read the Russian news. It's quite obvious. They think he's a moron.
Yeah, yeah, no, and one thing about Putin is I've never looked at him as a cat that's hard to read, right? I mean, he's been pretty clear in
No.
the past about what he believes, what he wants, what he thinks, and so I mean, I agree with you. I've been confused in the way that President Trump has dealt with Putin and sort of this what seems to be a very deep well of patience to try to find, and who knows, maybe down the road, maybe, what he's doing is, four-dimensional chess, and he's going to eventually find an off ramp that Putin wants to take and that will be acceptable. But I'm a cynic, so I don't know if that's going to happen.
Well, I see no reason to believe it's going to happen. At this point, it's very clear that the Russians are taking advantage of the situation. They think that the United States as a whole is a country that's moving closer, or it's decaying greater, I should say, or faster than it had been before. They think that Donald Trump is, yeah, and once again, I don't think that he's pro-Russian. I think that the Russians do perceive him, though, to be, just for their own purposes, somebody who's convenient because he's very easy to trick. They think he's just not very clever. I mean, they just frankly think he's dumb.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think I agree with it. Look, he's not, this narrative that the left, or the however you want to refer to that, sort of the progressive media, the narrative that he's Putin's puppet, which they slung around there for several years, and I don't buy that. I just think that he's a very transactional individual, meaning President Trump, and he's always imagining that he can find a deal. But I don't know that he's ever dealt with an individual like Putin before.
I don't think that Putin sees anything to gain in this. I think that he sees everything to gain quite the opposite. I think that he believes that Donald Trump is desperate to get a Nobel Peace Prize. He believes that he's desperate to achieve these personal goals of his own. And they believe that if they tap him along, he'll go with it because they don't think that he ultimately gives a damn one way or another what happens to Europe or to what happens to Ukraine for that matter. And so they believe that if they just tread him along, he'll go with it. And if you look at just the comments they made publicly, and once again, I said, watch Russian TV. This is 7 days a week. There's no secret what they think. This is not a conspiracy. This is 7 days a week. They think he is a moron. It is that simple.
Yeah. Yeah. What was your thought on the Tomahawks? I mean, did you think that was a solid idea? I don't want to shut the door on that yet. Who knows where it's going to go? And if he is strung along, then perhaps we're revisiting this issue later on. But at the point where it looked like it was going to be a done deal, what was your perspective on it?
Well, of course, it's a positive. I mean, they are weapons that are typically fired from a water base. They're fired from ships. That being said, there are other ways to get them off, but I think it was more interesting was the intelligence sharing that was probably going to go along with that. Ukrainian drones can physically go further than most Tomahawks. That being said, Tomahawks came out, what is it, 1982, and
Right.
they're better than anything that the Russians have ever had or ever will have. So they are an impressive piece of weaponry. They would have been very helpful. Ukraine is going after things such as the refineries, but also the factories that produce the chemicals that are needed for those refineries. There's a lot of single source refineries in the former Soviet states because they never thought there'd be independent countries. So by going after these refineries and going after the factories that produce the chemicals for them, it was something that could be a game changer. I mean, it really is within the U.S. president's choice. I mean, with the signing of a document, he could make sure that we would destroy such factories and Russia's ability to produce future oil in the country would collapse. Russia's economy would go totally into free fall. And it would be a matter of hours. It would be very fast. It would not take a lot of time. Russia, as our enemy, which we spent tens of billions of dollars across the Cold War, would be defeated. But for some reason, we've decided not to do that. We've decided instead that Vladimir Putin wants to make a deal.
And okay, so is that more because of sort of the nature of Trump's thinking, or do you think it's fear of escalation? What do you think drives
Well,
that?
it's two different ideologies, I'd argue. I think in the case of Biden, it was fear of escalation, total weakness, total lack of appreciation for American strength. Jake Sullivan was probably the worst we could possibly have running national security, a person who is
Yeah.
just scared of his own shadow. But on the other extreme, you have somebody who just does not recognize. Vladimir Putin at no point said he wanted a peace deal. At no point did he say, Donald Trump, please come negotiate for us. I don't know why the U.S. president believes that anybody has asked him. The Ukrainians haven't, the Russians haven't, but he has taken it upon himself to go in and negotiate something that the Russians have said, this idiot is over here fishing in waters that aren't his own and sticking his nose as business does belong, and he's going to end up screwing the Ukrainians and he doesn't even realize it. They're laughing at him. They're laughing at Americans.
Yeah. Now, I'm glad you mentioned Jake Sullivan. I agree with your assessment on Sullivan. And one of the things I found entertaining, and this is completely off topic, but over the past week, it's clear that the Democratic strategist Brain Trust put out a memo saying, okay, here's how we have to negate Trump's success over the Hamas ceasefire. And so they put out a memo saying, talk about how he's just following Biden's blueprint. That and so Sullivan, and to be fair, other toadies of that era came out and said, well, we left the exact blueprint on Trump's desk, so he's just following it. So, but I do love references to Jake Sullivan for some reason. Look, if economic pressures kept on Russia and the Ukrainians continue to target their energy infrastructure, and Putin continues to be basically isolated in key parts of the world stage, is that enough to get a successful resolution, or does Ukraine need to mount a very serious counteroffensive in order to drive them out? And is that even possible out of eastern Ukraine?
Well, it is possible. It's a matter of, though, a lot of different things happening at the same time. One of which is that I think the rapid decline of the Russian economy would be something that would be quite useful to making that a realistic outcome. Right now, the Russians are suffering massive losses. They're losing more than 1,200 men a day. Just in the summer offensive, they lost over 200,000 men that were casualtied, and they gained less than 1% of the territory of Ukraine. Since 2022, they've gained less than 3% of the territory of Ukraine. Have had 1,200,000 casualties. 1,200,000. That's simply incredible.
What's a credible casualty count that you've seen for Ukraine?
Realistically, and by the way, and I would have assumed that it was just nonsense, but realistically, it probably is about a fifth of that. It's a quarter of that. And the reason that it's true, and at first you say it's not possible, it's such a big difference, but it is. When you just watch the videos day after day, and I follow Russian news again, and I follow the Russian Telegram channels, you don't see the videos like you do on the Russian side. I mean, the degree that the Russians send all these guys in with crutches to go assault positions with no weapons, it's really just insane. I mean, you'll see that every day they lead the assaults down the same paths. There's dozens upon dozens of bodies just laying on the left, laying on the right. Guys are sitting on motorcycles, guys are sitting on golf carts, and they just get blown up pretty quick. And the Russians and their officers see this. They're watching from a distance, and they send the same guys the next day, the same group, another group down the same path, another group down the same path, day after day after day. And the only conclusion is that simply the officers are not rewarded for doing anything that's useful. They're rewarded for you followed the order. Today, you made 3 attempts to assault, and if you lost 3 times, that's okay. You made the attempt.
It's so World War I like. Right?
It's insane.
It is. It's the very definition of insanity. Jason, look, I've got a bunch more questions for you, but I want to be mindful of your time, and I really appreciate you. I know it's late there where you are in Kyiv, but I do hope you'll come on back because the cynic in me tells me we'll be talking about this for some time.
Thanks. Great talking with you, Mike.
Excellent. Take care. Have a good night. All right, that's Jason J. Smart. You can find him on YouTube at Jason J. Smart. I suggest you go there. He's got that place wired. He's been covering it for quite some time. All right, coming up next, China's military is tightening the noose around Taiwan with new drills and gray zone tactics, raising fears of an invasion. Former CIA analyst Buck Sexton just got back from Taiwan. He'll join us to share what he saw on the ground and how the island is preparing to fight back. Stay with us. Hey, Mike Baker here. Now, I'm the host of the PDB, as you know, but did you also know that I'm a bit of a gourmand? That's a very fancy, I think, French word that just means I like delicious food. So let me ask you this. Have you heard about a terrific company called Goldbelly? It's an incredible site that you need to visit, and it delivers America's most iconic foods from legendary restaurants straight to your door. That's right, anywhere in the U.S. Look, you can enjoy Chicago deep dish pizza, as an example, from Lou Malnati's, right? New York's famous cheesecake from Junior's, give that a try. Or even Franklin's legendary barbecue shipped from Texas. They'll even send the world-renowned stone crab from Joe's in Miami. You got to give that a go. Look, beyond restaurants, Goldbelly also features meals from world-class chefs like Ina Garten, Daniel Boulud, and Jose Andres. You have to take just a bit of time to check them out and look at all the amazing foods that you can have delivered straight to your door. I use Goldbelly because the variety is great. I've had everything from lobster rolls to ribs and brisket dropped off at the compound, and the deliveries are quick, they're they're fresh, and they're delicious. So if you're looking for that perfect gift, or you want to impress your friends and family who doesn't with an epic meal, well, go to goldbelly.com. It's that simple, and get 20% off your first order with promo code PDB. That's goldbelly.com, code PDB for 20% off your first order. Welcome back to the PDB Situation Report. Taiwan's defense ministry is warning that China has intensified its military posture in recent weeks, engaging in so-called gray zone operations designed to wear Taiwan down without triggering an outright war. Chinese aircraft are crossing the median line of the Taiwan Strait almost daily, and new satellite images show amphibious landing drills ramping up along China's coast. All of that could be a clue. It all points to a sobering reality. Beijing appears to be rehearsing for a blockade or even an invasion. Our next guest just returned from Taiwan, where he met with the president, the vice president, and top national security officials. He was very busy. He toured drone factories, saw the country's defenses firsthand, and says Taiwan is racing the clock to prepare. Joining me now is Buck Sexton, former CIA analyst and co-host of the Clay Travis and Buck Sexton Show. Buck, thanks very much for taking the time to be here on the Situation Report, man.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I feel like we're just about to start plotting to overthrow a small but relatively significant third world country. Between the two of us, this is great.
Really? Does it sound like Mela or anything like that? No?
I mean, something could be going on somewhere. I'm hearing some stories
Yeah.
about some of our former colleagues.
Well, let's not let's not let all the cats out of the bag. Hey, first question. I know I want to be mindful of your time, but first question: how come you let Clay Travis have the first name in your show?
Oh, that's easy. He's older, way older.
Oh,
You know, it's
yeah,
age before beauty is how that
yeah.
goes.
That's actually a good point. So you're saying he's a bit infirmed, is what you're saying.
I mean,
Okay.
he's not Biden level. I mean, but if you saw that golf swing that he put out there, I mean, it's even worse than my tennis serve. So who knows?
Wow. And that's not something to watch. Listen,
No.
all right, fine. I didn't bring you on to talk about that, although I think the audience will find it very interesting. You just got back from Taiwan. Tell me what you learned.
That was fascinating. I mean, we sat down with the president, the vice president, national security advisor. I mean, a whole range of the people that are, making the decisions there. And look, China is definitely preparing for an invasion. Whether they pull the trigger on it or not is the multi-trillion-dollar question. But there's no other possible military explanation for the massive buildup that they're doing, and the buildup has been accelerating in recent years, as has the frostiness of China-Taiwan relations. They've essentially cut off travel and cut off trade between Taiwan and the mainland. The CCP has.
Mhm.
And so there's really no conversation between these two states. Obviously, China says this is an internal matter. There is no country that we should be having a conversation with that is known as Taiwan. But I think there's very real, very elevated concern now. And because of a few things we can get into, I understand right now there's a big, well, is it America first to get involved in someone else's war? In this case, it's we don't want there to be a war. In this case, it's if we allow the Taiwanese, if we give the Taiwanese the defensive capability to prevent a war, that's better for absolutely everybody. And I think that if we were to allow China to take Taiwan, it would cause enormous problems for America, even if we totally sat back and let the whole thing happen.
Yeah. Yeah. So what does that look like if we give them the ability to defend themselves? What are we talking about?
Well, there's a whole range of what I think you could consider asymmetric force multipliers. When I was in country, Mike, just a couple of weeks ago,
Mhm.
there was we toured a drone, actually a drone factory, and then also a boat drone factory. So there's like sky drones. We saw those being made, and then I also saw a boat maker that was creating what are effectively autonomous speedboats packed with explosives that can be controlled simultaneously, multiple speedboats. by one control panel essentially.
Mhm.
So it's
Mhm.
like a speedboat, explosive speedboat, AI enabled swarm. And you can imagine for amphibious landing purposes for the Chinese, this is the kind of thing that can make life more difficult. Now they obviously have countermeasures. They've got all kinds of ship-mounted machine guns and other things that would try to deal with that.
Mhm.
But the weapon systems that they need to have are going to be the kind of things that rely on being smarter and being, like I said, asymmetric than what the Chinese are able to throw at it. Because in pure resource terminal and pure resources, you got a billion people with more ships than we have. It's a big problem for the 23 million man Taiwanese island to figure out how they're going to do this. They just have to raise that cost high enough.
It's a bit well, it's not unlike not a perfect example, but it's not unlike what Russia and Ukraine, are staring at, right? I mean, you've got a significant manpower advantage for Russia, and since I'm talking about those two right now, there's evidence that China, the PLA, has had observers on the ground in Ukraine for some time now, right? And they've been observing and learning from what's happening. In particular, I think the sort of the advancement of drone capabilities has been a big issue for them. Any indications that you saw that the Taiwanese are taking advantage of Ukraine's experience and working with them in any way in terms of their drone capabilities?
I asked them specifically about that, and
See,
it's
that's
interesting
you know
because
what, you and I look at that. See, yeah, we're
you know
both
what I
thinkers,
mean.
is what we are. We're big idea guys, is what we are.
It's what we call tradecraft, Mr. Baker, tradecraft. So the answer to the question is both is a yes and no. I'll start with actually let me start with the no side of it. They view it as a very different battle space, which of course it is, right? When you're talking about Taiwan, it's defense of an island that's almost 100 miles from the mainland. So the amphibious slash naval component and aerial component is really the ball game, right? I mean, if you're trying to stop massive or mass Chinese divisions once they have a beachhead, and like that's pretty much going to be game over. So you
Yeah,
really have to view it as a naval and aerial situation first and foremost, different than Ukraine, which has turned into trench warfare. However, to your question, what they are seeing and where they do take a lot of lessons learned is it's about both technology and manufacturing capacity, right? So you got to be able to make the stuff that can either take out the other guy's stuff or or obviously his anti-personnel, take out his troops. But you need to make them at scale. So what they're seeing in Ukraine is it's not just I have the newest version, the newest iteration of whatever this drone is that has anti-jamming capability, that has the speed and quiet needed. I mean, all these different things are being changed month to month, right? They're really moving very fast on the technological capacity of these things. But then it's, well, can you make 1,000 of them? Because if you can only make one or two of them, that obviously doesn't have the same. So that's where the Taiwanese are looking at this, and obviously everything they're doing is purely all their military capacity is inherently defensive. Like they're not invading anyone, certainly not the
right.
Chinese mainland, but they realize it's can we make this stuff better than our opponent, and can we make it at scale? Because even if you have better gizmos, better drones, better air defense tech, whatever it may be, if they can just overwhelm via swarms, and this is what the Russians have been doing to the Ukrainians, they're going to get through your air defenses, right? So it's those two pieces together that they've seen in Ukraine are so essential that the Taiwanese are definitely paying very close attention to.
Okay. Do you think that there's any chance that Xi Jinping is just using this threat of an invasion of Taiwan in whatever form it takes for leverage in other areas? Or, I mean, I realize I take your point from the beginning, which is what would be any other reason for this massive buildup. But, do you think that there is a chance that perhaps they're bluffing? I guess is the word I'm looking for.
I certainly hope so. This is where you start to look at. I mean, it's funny because I had somebody come up to me recently and says, I teach at the Naval Warfare College and amphibious landing. There's no chance the Chinese would ever do this. Okay, well, if you talk to people on the
Oh,
Taiwanese national security side, yeah, just because of the the difficulties. First of all, China's never fought a modern war. It's interesting when you think about it that way. I mean, there was obviously the Chiang Kai-shek and Mao in World War II and fighting against the
Mhm.
Japanese invasion, but they haven't fought a post World War II battle really at all. Some
Yeah.
little skirmish stuff here and there. They fought in Vietnam, but I mean, nothing meaningful as a first world power, right?
Yeah.
So their ability to do this stuff is a pretty big question mark in the first place. To execute on this stuff, it's one thing to have the tech and the soldiers, but can you actually get it done? But it's funny because on the other side of it, you'll talk to people in Taiwan who are saying, look, they just view this as a necessary part of the CCP's really origin story and therefore future, right? That this is that the one China policy is a central promise of the communists in China, and that for them to pass to go beyond the first island chain rather, this is an absolutely necessary step. And if they want to be able to go up against us as the other power across the Pacific for really global hegemony, this has to happen, right? There's no way they can be hemmed in by Taiwan and these other nations. So again, it's the multi-trillion dollar question. Do I think they believe they have more leverage in negotiations with us over the Taiwan issue? Maybe. I know the Taiwanese are concerned that China is going to try to run Trump through all these circles on trade, cheat on
Right.
trade, and then leave Taiwan high and dry. I don't see that happening, but we're watching it in real time. I mean, this is going to be happening in the weeks and months right ahead of us.
Right. No, I think you're right. I think the timeline is contracted. I don't know. This is why I wasn't an analyst,
Oh,
Buck. I can't even come up with a word. Please, look. If
he,
you'll
he
say
gets all the
where we
cool
are, don't,
stories,
don't
and
move.
he gets to just Mike gets to get all the cool stories, and then I get to correct his spelling back at headquarters. This is how it used to work. So
That's exactly what it was. We'd run it through the
yeah,
grammar. Okay, Buck, if you could stay right where you are, right, unless you have to go, change a diaper for
sure.
the baby. But stay right where you are. We'll be right back with more from the esteemed Buck Sexton here on the Situation Report. Stick around. This podcast is brought to you in part by Stash. Now, what if you could start investing without ever picking a single stock? That sounds intriguing. With Stash, the experts handle the hard part for you. Look, Stash isn't just another investing app. It's a registered investment advisor that combines automated investing with expert guidance. So you don't have to worry about figuring it out on your own. You can choose from personalized investments or let Stash's award winning smart portfolio do the work for you. With Stash, investing doesn't feel like gambling. It's simple, it's smart, and stress free. So your money can finally start working as hard as you do. Get access to world class financial advice with personalized guidance for just $3 per monthly subscription. That's right, you heard me correct. $3 a month. Stash has already helped millions of Americans reach their financial goals. Don't let your money sit around. Put it to work with Stash. Go to get.stash.com/PDB to see how you can receive $25 towards your first stock purchase and to view important disclosures. That's get.stash.com/PDB. This is a paid non-client endorsement, not representative of all clients and not a guarantee. Investment advisory services offered by Stash Investments, LLC, an SEC registered investment advisor. Investing involves risk. Offer is subject to terms and conditions. Welcome back to the PDB Situation Report. Joining us once again, the famous, infamous, let's go with both, Buck Sexton from the Clay Travis and Buck Sexton Show. Buck, thanks for sticking around. Let me ask you this. You were just there in Taiwan. What, from your perspective, what's the expectation from Taiwan as far as U.S. involvement or engagement in the event of an invasion from Xi Jinping?
Well, I think that there's the first order of business for them, which is that they really want to have and this came across in my interview with President Lai, that they just want to have the defensive capability to prevent all of this from happening. And the U.S. has a role to play in that, in selling them a lot of, they're not looking for any freebies. They have obviously a very important economic component of this as well, and it's also why they can buy these things, right? Their manufacturing, their tech sector is they're the global leaders in pretty much the most important thing in technology right now, which is microchip processing, microchip manufacturing. And they're 90% of the top end microchips, 50% of all global semiconductors are microchips. So they can pay for this stuff, Mike, and they want to buy it. They are finding that there are delays in getting it because, in part, our manufacturing capacity for being able to make things that go boom is strained right now because of Ukraine, because we've been supplying so much to the Ukrainian front. We're not at war, so we haven't maxed out our capacity like in a World War II, all of the above setting. And so we're already churning out. Now, some of this is going to be transferred, I think, to our European partners, and certainly the monetary component of it might be more on their shoulders. That's part of what Trump has accomplished. But they want more stuff and they want it faster. That's their main thing. They want to be able to buy more American advanced missiles. They were talking to me about all kinds of stuff. They want F-6. People say, why do they want F-16s? The Chinese will shoot them out of the sky right away during a war. Well, they want to be able to patrol their own skies and deal with these gray zone incursions in the meantime. And they say, oh, well, why can't they make their own, drone boats or whatever? They just can't make enough because China's obviously enormous and churning these things out at incredible capacity. So that's really what they want. If you're asking, would the U.S. come in if there was this invasion as the cavalry over the hill, or in this case, over the horizon, with our submarines and naval capacity? They certainly hope so. And if we do, the Japanese, it's believed, would as well. And that would be enough to probably halt this thing in its tracks with China. But that's also a pretty big freaking deal. And I understand that. So again, what is it that our parents used to say? An ounce of prevention, pound of cure, that whole thing. Preventing a war.
But again, I would think that, I'm sorry for interrupting, but if you think about this, how much can you build up their defensive capabilities, right? If you don't have a compact, if you don't have a treaty that says in the event of X, Japan will, others will come in and defend you. Right? If you don't have that, if you take that off the table, then basically what you're saying is, give them all the defensive capabilities you can, hope that that's a deterrent for China not to move on Taiwan. But I guess me being a cynic, if I was Xi Jinping, I would be watching the past 3.5 years in Ukraine and thinking to myself, okay, yeah, they're providing hardware, they're going to do that, but do I really believe they're going to get engaged in combat over Taiwan?
Again, what you're actually putting your finger on, Mike, is the U.S. policy, which is called strategic ambiguity, right? So
yeah,
the back and forth that you and I are having on this of like, well, would we, wouldn't we? That is the policy. The policy is maybe we would, maybe we wouldn't. That is our actual U.S. government approach to a defense of Taiwan. We leave it as, we're not saying we won't, we're not saying we will, we maybe. And that is also going into, I know it seems like, how could that be? But that is in fact the longstanding. There was the Taiwan Defense Pact, but then we've moved away from that. Congress passed that, I think, back in like the 70s, the 80s. I can't remember now. But we've since gone away from that pact, and now we have the strategic ambiguity issue. Look, it depends on a lot of things. How fast could China? I think that the concern. By the way, the #1 TV show in Taiwan right now is a TV show about a Chinese.
Let me guess. Is it South Park?
No, but that would be amazing.
That would be amazing.
That's that.
Yeah.
It's a TV show about the invasion, about a Chinese invasion of Taiwan. So just to give you a sense of like how much this is on their minds, there's a show called 0 Day, and it is about the days before the Chinese invasion hits. And it's a drama, and it's like a top TV show. I actually watched some episodes of it because we had it, obviously dubbed over. I think that it's going to be very interesting to see what the Trump trade policy with China ends up looking like, because that's also going to either weaken or strengthen, I think, Xi at home. But you've got some big challenges like the demographic reality of China, Mike. You got millions and millions of men because of the one-child policy with no realistic demographic hope of getting married or a better economic future. You got a country that has stalled out economically internally, that's getting called out for all the cheating practices on trade. What does a country like that do? sometimes it does aggressive bad things. So
Yeah.
there's historical precedent
Yeah.
to be really concerned about this. But again, I hope that this is like the thing that we keep talking about and then never happens, and then people wonder why we talked about it so much. But increasingly, I think the data is looking more like, we talked about the Iran thing forever, and then we actually well, the Israelis and us just blew their
Mhm.
stuff up.
Yeah. Well, I think, you look at the previous timelines. If you go back, not very far back, and look at what people were imagining in Washington, D.C. about, okay, when would China make a move on Taiwan? It was quite a ways down the road, right? It was a long timeline. And now that has shrunk. And, personally, again, I'm not a betting man, but if I had to, I'd say it would be before Xi Jinping rides off into the sunset. So part of this can be based on what is his health like, what's his grip on power like. But okay, so let's.
Can I just I think this is important, Mike,
Yeah,
because you
yeah,
laid to this. I mean, look at what Putin did
mhm,
with Ukraine. I mean, was it really? He already had Crimea. He'd already sort of established this de facto control in the east. He had to go for the whole thing. I mean, he wanted to take Kiev, as we know. He was going for the whole kit
yeah,
and caboodle, right?
yeah,
Why was he doing
yeah,
that? Well, it was because of narrative. It was because of broad national security perception from the Kremlin that we don't necessarily share at all here. But it moved them, and they've lost hundreds of thousands, as casualties in this
yeah.
war already. So,
It doesn't
do
it
we
doesn't
think it's
hurt that
crazy?
Eastern Ukraine is a breadbasket and contains an awful
Yeah, of
lot of important minerals. But
course.
yeah,
Well,
no, no, for the
Taiwan
benefit
has the
you.
most important, as I said, the most important technology in the world right now, and TSMC, among other companies there, which are
Yes,
TSMC is a trillion-dollar company. If China
yeah,
seizes that factory, for anyone who's like America first, I don't care about Taiwan. If China seizes the capability that Taiwan has to make these semiconductors, they are the leader in AI, they're the leader in technology, and they can choke off our tech economy overnight. That's a big
yeah.
problem.
Well, yeah, we already saw that with sort of the rare earths minerals, export
Yeah.
slabs that was heard around the world. So, yeah, I am always fascinated by that, and I get this a lot from people who are basically espousing an isolationist point of view. A lot of them being libertarians, and I got a lot of time, a lot of respect for a lot of the ideas that libertarians have. But I'm at the end of the day, I'm always thinking, I could never be one because I don't think that we exist in a bubble, right? The world is shrunk to the point where we're all interconnected. And just because we want to pretend like we're protected by water and friendly neighbors, that somehow something bad happens, it's not going to impact us from overseas. So I take your point there. Listen, I got a bunch more questions, but what we don't have is a bunch more time. Buck, I hope you'll come on back, and next time maybe dress up a little bit.
You don't like my Zelensky tactical? This is for you. This is
Yeah,
for
what the
you.
hell?
Come on.
What the...
I need more
Maybe you can wear a
missiles.
suit.
I need
Yeah.
more missiles and money from your country. And I wear the t-shirt for you.
Yes, I wore this T-shirt. Can I have some tomahawks? Yeah, we'll talk about that situation the next time, hopefully. But listen,
I'll come
Buck
back. Let's talk
Sexton,
Russia. Let's talk Russia next time. That'll be awesome because we'll
yeah,
have a lot of new stuff to get into.
exactly what we're going to do. And the next time we can also talk about how Ole Miss went undefeated for this college football season. There you go, hotty toddy. Edison, Buck, thanks so much. The Clay Travis and Buck Sexton Show. If you're not already a regular viewer, you should be. Well, that is all the time, unfortunately, that we have for this episode of the PDB Situation Report. I know, sad trombone. We got to get that sound effect somewhere. If you have any questions or comments or humorous anecdotes, please reach out to me at pdb@thefirsttv.com. You know what we do? We take your best questions and comments, and once a month we put them all together in a much loved, highly acclaimed episode called Ask Me Anything. So keep your cards and letters coming, please. We do really enjoy hearing from you. To listen to the podcast ad-free, you can do that. You can do it very simply and just become a premium member of the President's Daily Brief by visiting pdbpremium.com. I'm Mike Baker. Until next time, you know the drill. Stay informed, stay safe, stay cool.